All right, welcome back, everyone. Mark Becker here, founding partner of Cathexis Partners. Happy to be part of It's a Peer-to-Peer virtual conference. This year, again, we have a ton of sponsors and hosts that have helped bring this to you for no cost to you. So thank you to all of those folks. If you want to go to the next slide.
Oh, thanks, Mark. I need clearly.
You're just enjoying my awesome voice, right? You're just
I was like vibing. These are great partners, though.
This is. So yeah, thanks to all our hosts and sponsors, and definitely appreciate all of them, including One Cause, who's going to be with us today. Jenna and Rich are going to be presenting. Happy to have them here. And again, just a quick note, we have a lot of stuff we're presenting over these 5 weeks. This is 4 of 5. Hopefully you're all hanging in there with us. See you guys coming in and joining now. So thank you for being here. Or if you're watching a recording, that's terrific. Going on to the next slide, just want to quickly, again, everybody know how Zoom works, but remember, chat away. If you want to chat to everybody, ask the questions for the panelists in the Q&A so we can make sure we address those. And stay on at the end because there will be a 3-question survey just asking what you thought of it. And our friends at Halo are going to be raffling off some swag. So we want to hear about what we can do to make this conference better. I mean, it's already free, but how can we make the content better? What's the setup? What can we do? And want to make sure you're getting great stuff. So with that, I'm going to hand it over.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. Thanks everybody for joining us this Friday. Super excited to be with you and with my co-teammate in hand, Rich Dietz. Love getting a chance to, unfortunately, not see him and be in the same room, but get to see him on camera with you guys and share. So we would love to be as interactive as possible. So I'm a big fan of the chat. Like, go ahead and pull up the chat. Let us know when you're dialing in from. I'm down in Houston. It's been just as sticky and wet outside as you would imagine Houston being at this time of year. But like I said, go ahead, show us in chat, let us know you hear us loud and clear because it always helps me to kind of keep going through and making sure we're giving you guys what you want out of the session. But this session is all about peer-to-peer mythbusters when it comes to DIY. And I think it's one of our favorite topics, Rich. So today's mythbusters are going to be myself and Rich. So I'm Jenna Jameson. I manage all the research and communications for One Cause. So really focused on, how do we dig into donor data, make that actionable for nonprofits. And so some of what we're going to be sharing today is some data from a recent study and, specifically looking at DIY peer-to-peer fundraising, which I'm really excited to get into. And so, Rich, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and then let's get to myth busting.
Sure. Rich Dietz, Director of Peer-to-Peer Solutions here at One Cause. I always say I've been in the nonprofit space my whole career, master's in social work, so about as nonprofit-y as you can get. And I was working in nonprofits and kind of stumbled into this online technology world like many of you probably did. No one else wanted to do it or it looked kind of sort of interesting. And so I've been doing peer-to-peer fundraising since about 2002, 2003. And yeah, just here to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that is DIY fundraising, supporter-driven fundraising, whatever you want to call it. It's allowing your supporters to fundraise on your behalf.
We were talking to Mark and talking about different topics. I think DIY is one of these areas that we were just seeing so much growth into. I think Rich is one of the last things Rich and I were talking about. He's like, everybody should be doing DIY. So we really wanted to do a session that really breaks down maybe those expectations of what you may think is DIY and really show some opportunities there. And I think there's no better showing of opportunity than some of our recent research data we found. So we did a study back in April. So this is pretty recent data that's coming out, really focused on that giving experience for donors over the last 12 months. So really thinking about what was that pandemic giving like? And so within this survey, we were able to get really specific into different types of giving experiences. And one of them was DIY fundraising. And the way we kind of classified it was, someone that created a personal fundraising page on behalf of a nonprofit or who donated to someone's personal fundraising page. And so we were able to get really specific stuff. And I think one of the exciting opportunity stats out of that is that average donation of $215, which I think is huge, Rich. I think you and I have been doing this for a while, and seeing that average donation tip above 200 We did a study back in 2018. It was actually 99, so like huge growth since the 2018 study. But just we're seeing a ton of creativity, a ton of opportunity there. And when you kind of see the different categories we looked at in our study, events, more traditional run, walk, rides, peer-to-peer, and then DIY. Like DIY was like the biggest bulk of those that donated, said that they donated to a DIY campaign. So just a ton of growth that's happening there.
Just, yeah, huge growth there. I mean, all the other areas kind of stayed pretty stagnant, from 8% to 9% for events, 10% to 11% for peer-to-peer, but that DIY 12% to 20%. I mean, that's just a huge uptick. And I think it was, part of it had to do with the pandemic, but as we're going to talk about through this, just because it started, maybe had that growth because of the pandemic, people are now used to it and they want to do more virtual. They want to do more online. And a lot of people aren't wanting to go back to the ballroom quite yet. And so DIY is a great way to engage those people and volunteers. And we're gonna get into all that, but huge opportunity.
Okay, so for those who haven't found the chat box yet, I'm gonna really push you today. Bring up the chat box. Let me know, how do you define DIY? When you were looking at all the sessions and you saw we were doing one on DIY, you probably had something in your mind about what you thought DIY means. So go ahead, put it in the chat. I'm really going to look for, I'm probably going to stay on this slide until someone.
Don't be shy.
In the chat.
Get it in there.
So I mean, this is like the future of this session is dependent on someone getting in that chat and doing something for us. So I'll give it about one more second because I know I'm going to get you guys in there. But I would say some of the stuff we've seen as far as what people think DIY is, I've heard, DIY is just a donate your birthday. Thank you, Karen. Participant led, supported by an org. DIY is just a Facebook fundraiser or just gaming. And really what we see is that DIY is this huge breadth of any way that a supporter can fundraise on your behalf, Rich. So like, we have a whole laundry list up here, but let's talk about some of the different DIY campaigns that you've seen and what gets you excited.
Yeah, what gets me excited is just thinking of that breadth. I mean, just as an example, I was at a round table with a bunch of national organizations, and we started talking about DIY, and immediately everyone jumped to gaming. Everyone started talking about Twitch and stuff like that. And to me, that is so limiting. When you think of all the things that DIY can be, DIY should be any way that a fundraiser supporter wants to fundraise for you. So of course that's donate your birthday, donate your anniversary. But we're seeing a lot of gotcha days. So for the animal rescue type organizations, we're seeing gotcha days be, gotcha day is the day you adopted your rescue animal, becomes a gotcha day. So donating their birthday or their gotcha day, donating any other days, memorial tributes, personal challenges. We're gonna have some really good examples later on about some things like this, but think like the ice bucket challenge, but then allowing your supporters to create their own unique challenges. So one of my favorite ones, and Jenna's gonna laugh when I talk about it, but the pickle lady, I saw a campaign, there was a woman who hated pickles, and she said, if I could raise $250, I will eat a pickle, film it, and upload it to YouTube for my friends and family to come and look at, right? That's DIY fundraising. That's really putting the power in that supporter's hands to create some unique challenge. It creates more attention, more energy, it gives people something to do when they're stuck at home. During this crazy time. Group campaigns, third-party events. I mean, this one is huge. I know, I'd say 98% of organizations out there have done some sort of third-party event where someone calls you up and they say, hey, I want to do a bake sale. I want to do a barbecue. I want to do this thing. And you're like, oh gosh, now I've got to go create a campaign. I've got to set up a donation page for them and all that stuff. There's people out there that want to do this for you. And we're not making it easy for them to do. So there's a huge opportunity there. And then just let your supporters get creative. We're seeing just super creative ones. We have a couple of great examples that we're going to show you today, but just letting them fundraise any way that they want to. Really take that do it yourself to heart and let them do whatever they want.
Let them do it themselves. I love the pickle story because I think if you're going to remember anything from this, besides the fact that she was super aggressive in making you get into chat today, is that pickle story. Because I can just imagine, like, what would my version of the pickle story be? Like, what would people pay money to see me do? And it probably could be a pickle, but I love the whole unique people tapping into stuff that they know that their social community rally behind and donate for and using it for good. I think they're great examples. Another great one, I think, Rich, that we want to talk about is the Cosgrove Animal Shelter, because they really, I think, take on the full breadth of DIY and how they give supporters the opportunity. So do you want to share a little bit about this group?
Yeah, this was really interesting for two reasons. And I want to touch first on why they did their DIY campaign. So most organizations will do a DIY campaign. They run it all year round. That's great. What they did is they added it onto the end of their capital campaign. So they were doing a capital campaign to build a new shelter. And they did their private, ask and all that stuff. When they opened it up to the public, they actually added this peer-to-peer component on to finish off that capital campaign. They added an extra couple $100,000 onto their capital campaign. So think about peer-to-peer in new ways, one. And then two, this was a DIY campaign, and they just allowed people to fundraise any way that they want to. There's a little drop down there giving people suggestions. They could pledge a special day. That include gotcha day for animals, that include donate your birthday, all of that stuff. They could do yappy hours. They could do end of year, whatever they wanted to do. And this one is a great example. Vanessa is one that I actually pull up in a lot. She raised $5,000 by herself. And she didn't do it by just emailing her friends and saying, hey, donate to my campaign, right? She did it through a lot of third-party fundraising events. And so as you can see on her page, she did a gotcha day for her dog, Arias. She did an end of year event campaign. She did a yappy hour, which I love this one right here. The yappy hour is great. It's a little dog with a Tito's vodka toy. So a yappy hour is you get a bunch of dogs together, go to the park, create a happy hour, and you're with your dogs, right? And then she got even more creative. She used that sort of third-party event idea and created her own basket to raffle off. So she said, anyone who donates on my page during these dates, I'm going to raffle off this basket. And she created the basket herself. She got some dog toys, some dog treats, put them in a basket, and did that. So again, DIY is whatever she wanted to do, however she felt like raising funds. And she was able to do this through multiple events. And where this gets really powerful for me is if Jenna's doing a DIY campaign and she asked me to donate to her page, I donate 25 bucks. I'm done. I don't have to donate anymore. I'm pretty much off the hook. But if Jenna has 3 or 4 of these events, a yappy hour, a birthday, I might donate 2 or 3 times or attend 2 or 3 of these events. And so she's actually getting a lot more money per friend, per family member than if you just have a boring static page that says donate to it. So that's where I get really excited, is really putting the power in that fundraiser's hands and letting them do what they want.
I love it. I love the yappy hour. If I had a dog, I would do a yappy hour. Now I just need to get a dog so I can do a yappy hour is what you're telling me. Okay, are we ready for myth number 2, everyone? I don't have the time to manage DIY. How many times do you hear this, Rich, when you're talking to folks?
All the time. I mean, we all don't have enough time in the day, right? It's like we're so busy. We're wearing 18 hats. We got so many things going on. We got end of year coming up. We've got fall event season, all of that stuff. So yeah, don't have time. We hear this a lot.
So here's that share in the chat. You knew it was coming. So let us know, have you, and this I guess is a rhetorical question because we know we get this all the time, but have you had supporters that have asked you to set up a personal fundraiser? You know, are you set up to be able to do that? Was that something you had to try to create? Would love to hear if anyone's had experiences with that and why you're kind of setting that up. We'll kind of keep moving. I won't pigeonhole you guys again into like, I need a chat to move, but I think that's something like Rich said, that we know supporters want to do this. And I think that the way that we kind of think about it is that we want to create and make it really easy for you to focus on creating a campaign or a website or wherever it's going to live that is really easy for your supporters to go and kind of do it themselves completely, so that you're not having to always, recreate something every time. And I think this is something Rich and I were talking about, but it's like, how do you get something that's like a 1 day to set up, but 365 days of fundraising? So what do you mean by that, Rich?
Yeah, for me, it's like I think of all the times I get calls or someone say, hey, I want to do a fundraiser for you. And you're like, oh my gosh, I got to do all this work to set it up. Well, why not just do that once? Spend a day setting up your DIY campaign that runs year round. And then whenever someone calls you and asks that question, you say, perfect, just go to this URL. You can sign up. It's totally self-service from that point. So like put that work in. I mean, you can make it a solid day, create your emails, create your marketing material. We're going to talk more about marketing later, I know, Jenna, but like get everything set up. And then this is like an employee that works for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We don't have to worry about paying them overtime or anything like that. This is out there just doing the work for you. And then these volunteers, these fundraisers come in and spread your message, raise the funds. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. This is why I say every nonprofit should have a DIY fundraising campaign. If you're a large national organization, oh my God, you are losing, you're hemorrhaging money if you don't have a DIY campaign. If you're a small organization with one staff person, you should have a DIY campaign, because this allows you to have 1,000 people out there fundraising for you instead of just you doing it. So it doesn't matter where you are on that continuum, you should have a DIY campaign.
I think the other thing sometimes I've heard from folks is like they want people to do DIY, but they also want to control some of the branding that comes around. And like, how do I control that branding? How do I control that messaging? And so I know spending that time on like creating it to make it like a little bit of a process for your organization allows you to have some ownership of that branding. Make sure you've got the right messaging in there when folks are talking about your brand. And so I think we've got a couple example sites that we were going to walk through. And Rich, I'm going to throw it to you first to talk about the Connecticut Food Bank virtual food drive, and then I'll kind of take another one after this.
Yeah, this was a great one, a great example of, a group that just took the pandemic, took a situation and said, you know what can we do here different? So, food banks are really big with volunteers. Companies volunteer, individuals volunteer, they come, they work in the food bank, they help, move the cans and all that stuff, like all that stuff. All of a sudden COVID hits, they can't do that. So Connecticut Food Bank said, you know what, there's all these people that are asking to help. So let's launch our DIY campaign. So they launched their DIY campaign and said, hey, if you really want to help us, you can come and sign up and you can fundraise, even if you can't come into that. So if you have volunteers, that is your best place to start with your DIY campaign, is get those volunteers. If they want to help you, this is just an easy way for them to do it from home. And so they launched their campaign, super simple, straightforward campaign, very similar to Cosgrove. You could, hold third-party events, you could donate your birthday, you can do all that stuff. And they went out there and just started raising money.
Yeah, I think the food banks and what they've done over the past year to really shift to virtual food drives has been super creative, and I think has expanded a lot of growth. I know I was talking to another food related organization, and they aren't even planning to go back to the old versions of the food drives, right? Like they're planning to kind of stick this way because it allowed their supporters to have more creativity besides just truly bringing in the food cans, right? And it expanded opportunities there. This other organization that we wanted to share was the Alberta Cancer Foundation. And so they have a lot of folks that they know were really engaged in stuff like head shaves and a lot of stuff like that, where people were donating, actual hair to cancer patients. And it's a lot of stuff that we know that people do. And they were getting all these requests. And so they wanted to make it really simple to kind of funnel those. And so you can kind of see they created this little microsite page that was asking folks like, okay, if you're ready to fundraise, here's some ideas, or if you had a different idea, but some of their most popular stuff like the head shaves, the golf tournaments, the run walk rides, they made it really simple for folks to kind of spin off. But by creating this little bit of a form, it was kind of helping to funnel all of these opportunities through. And we're going to share one of these example campaigns in our next myth, which brings us to myth number 3. DIY is not for our supporters because they're either too young, too old, not tech savvy. I would love to see in chat, anybody else have you either used these words yourself to talk about your supporters? Have your board talked about your supporters in this way? Because I think we've heard on all sides of the spectrum why DIY can't be right, Rich.
Oh my gosh, this is the number one thing that I get. Oh, especially the too old, not tech savvy, like they're not able to do it. There is no excuse to not do a DIY campaign. I mean, if you are holding back on your DIY campaign for any of these reasons, please stop. I guarantee you, there's always going to be someone that doesn't like to do it online, but there's way more that are going to want to do it online. And so give them that opportunity. Too young, I mean, there's definitely not too young. We're seeing Gen Z being one of the most philanthropic generations that have ever existed. They've been fundraising pretty much since birth. I have Gen Zs myself, and they're always talking about the environment and fundraising and nonprofits and philanthropy. I mean, this is just who they are. And so giving them the tools to actually go out there and do it. And they're very tech savvy, so they're going to be out there totally pushing those tools. And then all the way to the other end, the older generation. I always joke, I use my mother-in-law as an example for a very long time. If grandma and grandpa want to see pictures of their grandkids, what do? They get on Facebook, and then Facebook is kind of the gateway to everything online. Once they do that, then all of a sudden they're doing online banking, they're, you know, Twitter, you name it, they're on there, and they're way more tech savvy than we give them credit for, especially with the new tools that are out there, tools that are mobile friendly. So if you have a DIY platform that is incredibly mobile friendly, obviously One Cause does, and we do, and that's the reason we focus on that, is because if that older generation, if they are going to do it online, it's probably going to be on their phone, or if my mother-in-law, her iPad, she's on that iPad 24/7. So if she can't do it on her iPad, it's probably not going to get done. So it has to be mobile friendly for that.
I'm going to take us back to Gen Z, because I think this is a really great example coming out of that Alberta Cancer Foundation. So this is a 13-year-old based out of Alberta. She had planned on growing out her hair. She was going to donate her hair to like a similar like Locks for Love type of organization. But then she realized she wanted her impact to kind of go beyond just helping one person. And so she combined that idea of, you know, that I think we're familiar with, which is, you know, growing out your hair to create, you know, a wig for a cancer patient. And she also wanted to turn into a fundraiser. And so she kind of set a goal out to raise $1,500. She ended up raising over $5,000 and said once she hit her goal, that's when she was going to go ahead and cut her hair, and she was going to share it on social media and get everyone up. So she was able to really expand that reach. And so she created a really simple landing page to kind of funnel all the donations through. And you can kind of see here, oh, my animation didn't do anything crazy fun there. But I think it was like a really great way for, I think, some sort of challenge that we're really familiar with. We're really familiar with folks doing the head shave idea, but turning into a bigger fundraiser and just making it really easy for even a 13-year-old to be able to set up a site. And I do know, because folks always ask this question, I know her dad helped her with it because of, you know, different ages there, but, you know, it was very simple for a 13-year-old to be able to expand out and grow. And so that too young myth, I think we can bust that one, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's very clever how they did this one too. So, you know, since she was 13, and, you know, we're right on the border of that COPA compliance, you know, laws and all that stuff. So what she did is she chose not to show her face. So she showed the back of her head, and she shows her getting her haircut with her mask on, you know what I mean? So, and her dad, of course, maybe helped her, you know, get the page set up and all that stuff. So, you know, we stayed on the right side of the law, you know, there with COPA compliance, but also got that younger person engaged.
So let's bust the too old, because I think this
then the too old. This is one of my favorite examples. This is one of our customers, Alamance Regional Hospital down south. I believe they're down in Atlanta, and so they have a big event every year. They call it the Belle of the Ball, and they have 7 women compete to see who could raise the most money. Whoever raises the most money gets crowned the Belle of the Ball. And so as you can see here on this screenshot here, my favorite person is Glenda. So Glenda, definitely not the millennial or Gen Z generation, more, you know, my generation and older. And she raised $48,000 here using online tools, and she totally kicked butt of the 2 millennials on both sides of her. All right, so the millennials raised 16 and 30 on both sides of her. She did way better, and she did this all completely online. She used the tool. She did those third-party fundraising events. You know, she asked friends and family for money. And what was amazing is she got just a ton of small donations. There was $100 donations, $200 donations, $250, all of that stuff. And so, you know, she just got really excited using the tools. And so anytime you think you got folks that are older and they're not tech savvy, just think of Glenda, and yeah, let them get out there and raise. Who wouldn't want $48,000 from someone like a Glenda? I mean, that's just huge.
I think having these like 2 examples are great. So, you know, you're going to have the slide deck afterwards. So when you go and you're talking to your board, you're talking to your development team, and you're saying, why should we do DIY? If you get the too young or you get the too old, here are 2 different sides of the spectrum that you can kind of share. I think the other thing that we wanted to talk about in this kind of myth here was this idea around like motivators. And so one of the unique things that we like to do in our research is better understand, like, why do people give? Why do people fundraise? And we look for differences in generations. And I'll tell you, we didn't find a huge difference in what's motivating our Gen Zs that are fundraising and what's motivating our boomers and mature donors that are fundraising on your behalf. And you can kind of see here, like, we've got like 1 through 10 on what folks said most motivated them to fundraise on behalf of an organization. So like, this is actually when they're in the thick of it, what's keeping you engaged in a campaign, what's getting you and motivating you to continue doing it. So, you know, things like seeing progress, being a part of a team, leaderboards, like anytime you're able to kind of bring in some combined stuff. I think a lot of the examples that we shared on DIY fundraising have been individuals, but you can also do groups. And you can also make it fun and competitive, right, Rich?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I always like to call out on this, because I think no matter what size of your campaign, adding a matching gift can just be hugely motivating for both the person that's fundraising, but also the donor that's giving. I think matching gifts is a big piece of things that's really been helping motivate peer-to-peer kind of throughout all types of campaigns.
Yeah, I think what's the other thing that really jumps out at me on this is, I know when I talk to a lot of people about peer-to-peer and especially DIY and stuff like that, they're like always like, oh, well, we got to come up with incentives and we got to have prizes and we got to have the Yeti cooler that someone can earn. I'm not seeing that anywhere here in the top 10. I mean, maybe number 9, activity-based rewards, depends how you define that there. But those incentives aren't really what's motivating them to get out there and fundraise. So I wouldn't get wrapped around the axle about what incentives and what prizes and all that you have. Those can work in certain situations and maybe for certain individuals, but for the most part, like they want to see that progress. They want different ways to communicate. Those the leaderboards. I mean, the leaderboards can be extremely competitive. We've seen it both internally at One Cause. We actually did a fundraising campaign ourselves where we are competing against 9 other software companies in the Indianapolis area where our home base is. And it was great to compete against those other software companies, but where the real competition happened was within One Cause. Yeah. Those fellow employees where you don't want, the sales team to outraise the marketing team and all that stuff. And so just having those leaderboards and getting those competitive people, up there. And then like Jenna said, being that part of the team or having a team lead, team captain, that has proven, and we've shown that in multiple studies that Jenna has worked on, that being part of a team, having that little bit of peer pressure really is what's motivating for folks. So it's not the Yeti cooler, it's everything else that you see on the screen here.
I think I want to wrap up this myth. We're kind of hitting young or getting old motivators with the whole technology conversation. And so I think, the days of saying that our donors aren't tech savvy, we know that consumers are shifting to mobile. I think that whole waiting for shift to mobile has been gone about 5 years ago, but I know there's some organizations that maybe still have opportunities to improve that mobile experience. And so what you're kind of seeing here up on screen is from our most recent donor survey of asking folks like, where did you donate? And then asking people how easy was it to donate on those different channels. And so you can see that, website donations, mobile donations, a lot of donations kind of coming through there, even social media donations when it comes to DIY. But we are still seeing cash and check happening when it comes to DIY. And so I think it is important for you to have really simple ways for folks to add in offline donations, no matter where it's coming from. So like multi-channel donations are still happening, but it's looking at where we've seen that growth in mobile, where we've seen that growth in social, which continue to grow every year that we've done that. I'm going to jump down to that bottom chart here when we're looking at ease. And, look at how easy someone said it was. 87% said it was very easy to give via mobile, where only 87% said through the mail or cash and check. So the easiest way that for folks to give, they're saying, is through social media and through mobile. And so if that's how they naturally are saying, like, they find it easy to give, those are the areas that we want to continue to improve that giving experience, because we're only going to continue to see growth there. Anything else on these charts, Rich, that jumps out to you or gets you excited?
Yeah, the thing so I think at first glance, you can look at this and go, oh, well, we're doing great, right? 80+% of people say it's very easy to donate in all these different ways. And I like to look at it a little bit different. Those people that say somewhat easy, that's a problem to me, because it should be very easy for everybody. If it's somewhat easy, you may be losing people right there, because if it's kind of sort of easy, I may lose interest. I may not actually complete that donation. So think about lost donations from it not being super easy. And one of the things I really suggest is you should go and try and donate to your organization all these ways, so you can find out how easy it is for your organization and for your supporters. So go make a social media donation, go make a text donation, go make a mobile, a website, and see what that process is. I guarantee you will find ways to make that process easier and move people up into that very easy, and you will increase your donations. I mean, it's just the way. I mean, everyone's used to Amazon and Netflix now, and if you don't make it super, super easy, then they're going to go find somewhere else to go make that donation.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I would love, if you guys are all in the same room, I'd say show of hands of who's actually looked at their mobile donation or their text donation in the last 6 months, because I think it's something that you need to look at. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Rihanna. Or Renea? Sorry, Renea, I think. Thank you. I appreciate you coming along with us. I think, every 6 months, every year, how often are you recommending, Rich, people look at that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I would say every 6 months would probably be a good place to start. But I think it's something where you want to do it as much as possible, and always be looking for ways to optimize that, especially with something like mobile. Mobile can change so rapidly. New devices are coming online all the time. Upgrades to iPhones, upgrades to Androids, all of that sort of stuff. And you want to be testing that constantly because you want to find the issue before it becomes an issue. I had one client that I worked with for a really long time. They called me up one day saying that their website was broken and things weren't working. And it turned out that it was a mobile issue that they were having, and they didn't know that they had it, and no one had told them. And it had probably been going on for a little while, maybe a month or two. And a month or two of people not being able to donate, that could be a game changer.
Yeah. And Renee, I'm sorry. Thank you. That's my face palm of the presentation is mispronouncing Renee's name. I appreciate you correcting me. I need that sometimes. Okay, let's jump to our next myth, which is I think this is a fun one to debunk, right, Rich? You can't retain peer-to-peer donors. I know this is something, Rich, you run into a lot in your conversations.
Yeah, I think this is where peer-to-peer has really gotten a bad rap. And I think it's kind of a chicken and egg type situation. Is people say, oh, we tried following up with peer-to-peer donors and none of them ever donated again, so we lost them. So peer-to-peer doesn't work. I mean, you can't retain those donors. And then it becomes a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then we don't actually work with those new donors in the right way to actually retain them, right? If we treat them just like every other donor, I guarantee you're not going to retain those donors, because they are very different donors. And I think we're going to kind of dig in a little bit here about what that means. But really, you need to focus on how do you retain peer-to-peer donors, because they are very different than your normal donors.
All right, here's the interactive part of our program. What percentage of peer-to-peer donors do you think say they're likely to give again? So go ahead and put that in the chat, and I'll tell you, there is a right answer, but there is no wrong guess. So please go ahead and make your best educated guess. Renee is saying 20%. What about you, Jamie? Any idea? Karen? Marty? Anybody else with ideas? 30, 65. Oh, Texas. Mark has got some folks that really want to donate again. 80%, Jamie. 41. All right, there we go. Okay, so actually what we found is that about 49% of peer-to-peer donors say that they're going to give again in the same way. But you see that 66% say that they had a really favorable feeling towards a nonprofit post donor. So the way that we like to present this is this idea of a funnel. Like, how do you bridge the gap between some of that? If someone makes a donation to your organization, they're feeling favorable about it, how do you bridge that gap between saying that they're likely to give again? So like right now, my math skills, 17%. Is that right?
Yeah, very good.
That 17% jump there is a place that I think we can really tighten. And Rich, what you were saying is that there's a lot that you can do with how you treat those peer-to-peer donors to kind of bridge that likelihood there. But the last thing on this chart that I like to talk about, it's like that regular donor. And I know all of us are really seeking those donors that say that they will give to us annually or give to us on a monthly basis. So 38% said that they would become a regular donor to an organization and set up to become like a subscriber donor where they would give annually. 28% said that they're going to become a regular monthly donor, which I think is great, right? If 28% of those donors that came to you for the first time and gave to a peer-to-peer campaign became a monthly donor, like that's great, reoccurring revenue that's coming in for an organization. But I think some of the things that we're going to talk about in our recommendations piece is like, how do we start at the very beginning from, right when they have a favorable donation experience to how do we get them to say that they're likely to give again to actually making that gift. But anything else on this chart that's jumping out to you before we get into those recommendations?
Yeah, I think, the folks listening at home are probably thinking, well, that's great. 66% they had favorable feelings, 49% they'd give again the same way, but we're not seeing that at all, right? We're not seeing anywhere near those numbers. And what I think the problem is we need to treat peer-to-peer donors very differently than we treat our regular donors. And they should be two separate buckets. So let's say someone donates to your organization for end of year, or they just donate because they found you online, right? that's a donor who probably knows something about your organization. They've maybe researched it a little bit. They've read some stuff about you online. They've maybe looked at your website. So they kind of have some familiarity with you and they donate. Okay. A peer-to-peer donor might not know anything about you. It could just be Jenna asked me to donate to her campaign. I go donate because of Jenna, because she's my friend. I'm going to go donate to her. I might not know anything about your organization, right? And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, you send me your monthly newsletter and then you ask me to donate again. And I'm like, I don't even remember who these people are. Why are they sending me this? Like, I didn't, like spam, and they're complaining that it's spam, right? So when we get our peer-to-peer donors, we have to assume that they know nothing about us, right? They don't know anything about what we do, how we do it, who we are. And we need to educate them and treat them as if they're a non-donor. And so going back to step one, like, if they have favorable feelings about us, that's great. That's a good start. And now let's start educating them. And so I like to take those peer-to-peer donors and put them in a separate bucket. They don't get the monthly newsletter. They don't get any appeals for sure until I'm sure that they're more educated and understand what we are. And I think the next slide kind of goes into what those important things are that we want to make sure that they're educated on.
Yeah, let's jump to that. So I think the way that we positioned this question in our survey was asking folks, especially of those that said that they were, the 47% that said they're likely to either become a regular monthly or regular annual donor. We wanted to understand what was most likely impacting their retention. Why would they say they were going to give again? And the number one thing is saying that they felt like that their donation made a difference. So it's like understanding that impact, right? Really feeling like that the donation they made was going to make a difference. And then these other elements I think are just as important as well. So about 38% said it was that the process of donating was positive and easy. So that comes at that very top of the funnel, right? Having a favorable experience. If you found donating really hard to do, if you got, knocked around and had to fill out 3 forms, if they didn't take your credit card that you wanted to do or made it really hard for you, you're not going to have a positive donation experience. And so you see kind of ease and enjoyment kind of coming into those next two that we're seeing there as important for impacting retention. And then we see the whole idea of understanding impact again. Organization informed me of that impact, and the campaign or event inspired me. So to me, the things that I would write down if I was taking some notes off of this, it's like to impact retention, you need to show impact, which is kind of a little bit in your head, but we're seeing that kind of, I would say, kind of throughout this in our top 5 that we're calling out is like impact and ease are kind of the big 2 that I see coming out of here that are impacting retention the most. Anything else on this chart before we dive into like how could we actually show impact?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to go into is how to show impact. So I think that's perfect. And one of my favorite ways to show impact, and this works really well with those peer-to-peer donors, is you put them into a thank you campaign. I like to take all those peer-to-peer donors, put them into a separate campaign, preferably email, since they're already online donors. We want to do this via email. You could do some direct mail pieces if you wanted to as well. But I'd call it a thank you campaign where I'm going to thank them a week after the event. I'm going to thank them a month after the event, 2 months, 4 months, 5 months. And those thank yous are, hey, thank you so much for supporting us. A reminder who we are. And yeah, you did donate to us because of your friend, Jenna, Here's some of the amazing things that we've been doing already with the money that we raised, right? So letting them know what that impact is, what the difference is. Follow up again a month later. Hey, just wanted to check in again, let you know, here's some of the great success stories that we have from the money that we raised, in that campaign. You do that a couple times and they start to really understand, oh, wow, that $50 I sent that's really making a difference. These people are doing good work. Then they're more open to that newsletter, to that next appeal, to something of that nature. So it's thank you, impact, thank you, impact, thank you, impact. That's probably the most powerful thing you can do. And the best way to do that is success stories, storytelling, all of that stuff. So I'm sure you guys have been on 52 webinars about storytelling. So just use all of that content that you learned on those webinars and add that into your impact series. And I think you'll start to see a really big difference with those peer-to-peer donors.
Seeing how important impact is, that means you have to have some sort of way to communicate with these donors to show that impact, right? And so I think that's why we really push organizations, if they're going to, set up a DIY, to pull it out of things like a Facebook where it just lives and you don't have access to data, actually into something that you have a little bit more ownership of, so that you can kind of retain those donors. You can start a communication with them. You can add them as a, first-time donor welcome series, like Rich was mentioning. Like, it's so important to kind of pull that through. Renee is asking for some samples, so we'll definitely, I think we have some other content that we have that has some samples, and we can kind of look into that and get that over to you. But I think that the key here is if we understand how important it is to show impact, we need to make sure that we have that donor information to be able to reach out to them. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you go on the One Cause website, we have quite a few case studies on there that talk about, and there's some that talk about the follow-up. But I would say the best example would be go look at your success stories. The success stories you have for your organization, those are the best examples, and you share those. And you just have an opening paragraph being say, hey, thank you so much for your donation. And we're already making a difference with the money that you gave us. And here's an example. And then you paste your stories down below. We should all be collecting those stories already. I mean, those stories are gold. That's what people want to see. That is the best way to show impact.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Rich.
Yep.
Are you a data guy or a story guy in your showing impact?
I'm a data with story. So I'm going to totally just hedge and go in the middle. I've seen the most impact made with data and telling a story. So a great example I had was a domestic violence organization I worked with. They specifically worked with police families. So, police have a very high rate of domestic violence. And so they were setting out all these stats about, one in three police families suffer from domestic violence, and it really wasn't resonating. But then when we started, every time we gave a stat, we would give a story that made that stat come to life. All of a sudden, donations started coming in because people can make that human connection then. So I love to have a stat and then a story behind. If you'll notice this webinar, every time Jen and I have put stats on the screen, we've backed it up with a story. We backed it up with a client example, a case study, or something of that nature, because that really brings it to life and makes it a lot more memorable, like the pickle lady, right? Like the pickle campaign. So combine both of them, and that way, people that are right-brained, you're going to speak to them. People that are left-brained, you're going to speak to them as well, and it kind of combines them.
All right, so let's hit our last myth that we have. If you build it, they will come. I've created this website. It's all pretty. I made the process really easy, but no one's using it. So Rich, I know we've kind of experienced that with some organizations that we've been working with where they spend all the upfront time, they're bought into DIY, they think it's going to be a success, and they build it and they just sit and wait. So what do you kind of think about this myth as we get?
This is one of the ones that hurts me the most. It's the most painful. I'll work with some of our customers who they'll spend 3 weeks talking about the colors of their website and the button and where the button should go. And they spend so much time making the site look exactly the way they want. And then they just stop and they don't do the most important thing, is the marketing. I can guarantee you I would have a more successful campaign with a basic, boring website and a good marketing plan than an amazing website and a poor marketing plan, right? Your marketing is what's going to make or break your entire campaign. And marketing doesn't have to be complicated, as we're gonna get into on the next couple of slides here. It doesn't have to be super complicated or complex. You don't need a 18 email autoresponder marketing automation flow that moves. You just need to talk about it, and you need to talk about it in different ways, different channels to different people, and you'll start to see some traction there.
Yeah, so like Rich was saying, I think the key to this all being successful is your supporters to know what's out there, and to know your supporters can fundraise the way they want, they can get creative. So you have to promote it. You have to, promoting it and talking about it is so key to driving engagement. And like Rich mentioned, we have a couple of tips we're going to get through on this next slide, but just like you do with any other campaign that you're going to launch. The thing with a DIY is because it's evergreen, you might forget about it. So I would treat it like an evergreen thing that you should always be talking about. Like you probably have a really structured one around your gala. This is when we, 3 months out, we're selling tickets, and then we're moving to this, or your run, walk, ride. You have like a marketing plan that's probably really firmed up, but DIY can sometimes get forgotten, but there's so much opportunity here, and we've kind of put together a couple of tips of ideas of where you could promote this and where you could be thinking about it. So that first one is that prominent website location. So we have that Alberta Cancer Foundation that makes it really easy for folks. You probably already have someplace on your website, ways to get involved, ways to support us. that DIY should live right there. And Rich, it shouldn't be at the very bottom of that website, right? I know that's something you've been into.
God, that just, it's a dagger in my heart when I go to a nonprofit's website and I'm looking at, giving them some suggestions of how they can improve their fundraising, and I get to their ways to help, and they've got Amazon Smile is above their DIY campaign on that list of ways to help. And I'm sorry, Amazon, great that Amazon does this and they, donate millions of dollars every year, but a single organization does not make a lot of money with Amazon Smile. I guarantee you your DIY campaign should make 100x what your Amazon Smile campaign makes. So do not put that lower on the list. So get that DIY, make it prominent, make it very easy for people to find, and don't bury it. It's sometimes an Easter egg hunt to find your DIY campaign. Is it under ways to help? Is it under support us? Is it on the bottom of their donation page? I don't know. If I have to hunt for it, I'm not going to do it because I don't know that it's there. So make it prominent and make it right up there, and talk about it a lot.
I like this next one because clearly I'm a communications person, but I would include it in everything. If you're a monthly newsletter type of organization, I would spotlight a DIY story, some DIY campaign that someone did, big and small, make people understand, $500 can do a lot for us. A $500 DIY campaign is great. You would be so happy with a $500 gift, So I think I would spotlight, an example DIY campaign in a newsletter, and, interested in creating your own or giving people ideas of ways to come up. You can make it really fun and themed based on the seasonality of different ways that folks could give. Social media is another great place to promote these out, being able to do spotlights on those. Helping to promote those that do have DIY campaigns going on for you. So, Rich is doing a birthday fundraiser this month. Check out Rich's page to hear a little bit about why he's so passionate about X nonprofit. I think there's a lot of opportunities to really, it should live and have a space, on an ongoing basis, whether that's monthly for you or whatever your cadence of communication is. It should be included in everything you do.
Yeah, and it's key to talk about every month, because if you do a big launch of it in, say, June, right? And you're talking about DIY in June and it's all, it's everywhere and all that stuff. Well, my birthday's in November. If you don't mention it to me in October or November, I'm not going to even remember that you have a DIY campaign for me to donate my birthday, right? So you got to be talking about it all the time. So then when I am thinking about doing something, it hits me and I go, oh yeah, that's right. They do have a DIY campaign. I can't donate my birthday. And then I'm going to jump on a deal. I'm not going to remember what you talked about in June. I'm just not. So it has to be every month. It has to be as much as possible that you're talking about it. And I love Jenna's example of spotlighting DIY fundraisers in your newsletter, on your social media. Some people get competitive and they're going to want to do more than that person that you highlight, and they're going to want to be highlighted themselves. And so they're going to do that. Other people are going to be like, oh, I didn't know I could even do that. And then they're going to want to jump in and do it. So you don't know what's going to resonate with people. And so the more touches, the more communications you can have out there about it, the better.
This next one, share your events. So if you have a gala, a run, walk, ride, whatever it could be, those are people that are really bought in, really connected to the mission. They're there to engage in the mission. Letting people know about the DIY program then is completely appropriate. It could also be included in a follow-up. I think, after you completed the ride, we'd love for you to stay connected with us. Here's more opportunities to continue to fundraise with us. Like it can fit there really well. This next one, though, I want to spend a little bit more time on, which I think is the board. I think getting the board bought onto the opportunity of DIY, like I would really push this to our board members. This is a great way for themselves to support the organization. I know some boards have like a give or get, where they either need to give a certain amount or go raise a certain amount. And I think, keying them up and getting them set up on their own DIY campaigns and letting them do it in fun and creative ways. Yeah. And then those are kind of seeded DIY campaigns that you can use to promote it to your bigger base, right? If you say, we're going to use this board of 10, or we're going to use this board of 20, however big your board is, and you say, hey, everyone on the board, we'd love for you guys to try out one DIY campaign this year, whatever that could be, make it really easy for them. And then you've got those slated stories that you can use to promote out to the rest of the supporters.
100%. Those become your case studies. Yeah. And I also love, is a great way to get those board involved. I've worked with many boards over my career. I've been on a number of boards, and there's always people on the board that are uncomfortable with fundraising. They don't like it. They don't want to do it. But if you give them that DIY campaign, it makes it so much easier for them. They can send off some emails. They can do a third-party event. They can do a backyard barbecue, make that their fundraiser. You give them more tools, and they can find the way that's more comfortable for them. I guarantee you on your board right now, you have someone that will go run 4 or 5 fundraising events for you. If you make it easy for them to do. You just don't know it yet. They'll do cocktail parties, they'll do happy hours, yappy hours, you know, whatever it is. There are ones out there that want to go do that. And if you make it easy, they will go do it. And once they've done a few, they get really excited about it. And then what's really great about DIY is then everything we just talked about today. So your board member does 3 or 4 of those DIY fundraising events. They bring in some new donors. You follow up with those donors the way we talked about, you know, letting them know that impact, educating them on what you do. You turn them into DIY fundraisers, potentially even more board members, right? And this all starts to feed itself. And that's where I get really excited when you put that power in the fundraiser's hands.
And then this last one, I think, is the volunteers, who I would say are your absolutely most loyal supporters, because they are giving you their time, their energy. If you're not following up at the end of a volunteer opportunity with either an ask for donation or a ways to fundraise, like that's just such a missed opportunity. And so I think including this in the way that you follow up, follow up with your volunteers, or the way you close out a volunteer time, letting them know about this opportunity. Like, these are the people that are seriously most engaged. They came, they showed up, they gave you their time. You know, these are the ones that are going to get really excited about a DIY opportunity, right, Rich?
Oh my God. And another dagger to my heart is when I talk to a nonprofit and they say, oh, we don't want to ask our volunteers to do that. They're already doing so much for us. And I'm like, no, no, you're not going to force them to do it. You're not going to make them do it. You don't even want all of them to do it. But I guarantee you, there is a certain percentage of your volunteers that want to do this. You are keeping them. You are stopping them from helping you the way that they want to. They want to help you as much as they possibly can. And what we also saw is, you know, with the pandemic and with COVID, there are certain volunteers now that don't want to go back to volunteering in person, but they still really, really want to help you. So give them that opportunity to actually volunteer in this way and really make a difference. I think you're doing them a favor. You're not asking them for too much. I guarantee you. Trust me. Talk to a few of them. Talk to the few of them and see how it goes. Do it one-on-one, but please engage your volunteers in that way.
Okay, so to wrap it up, we did mention a couple of studies throughout the presentation today. These are all available for free for download on our website. I can also include it, and I'll put it in the LinkedIn group as like a follow-up with the slide decks in case you guys want to dig into the data and nerd out with us. We do a lot with this data and talk about it, and I welcome any questions as you're getting those reports, and if you want to shoot me a line, I'm happy to do that. But we did kind of carve out some time for questions, and I know we had some folks kind of engaging along the way. But if there's any questions, feel free to put them in chat, put them in the question and answer. We can take them now. But as we're waiting for any questions to come in, Rich, what are some any last minute tips on this? Any last thoughts that you want to do as we're kind of wrapping up the 5 myths?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I always say when I do any webinars like this, just take something that we've talked about from here and go and test it. If you already have a DIY campaign, then take one of the tips on marketing it or making it better. If you're not doing a DIY campaign, please start exploring getting that up there in live. Just get something out there and do it. You're 100% leaving money on the table if you don't have a DIY campaign. It's just such an easy campaign to get up and going, and then allow your supporters to really help you.
Well, if there's no questions, we can definitely bring Mark back on and close this out. But it was really fun to spend our Friday with you guys. Thanks so much to Mark and Cathexis and Peer-to-Peer World for letting us join. We really enjoyed it. And I know we're not done yet today, right, Mark? You've got some other great sessions coming up.
We do have some other great sessions, yeah. And thank you so much for yours. That was really informative, and I love the delivery, and yeah, really easy to understand, and great points all around. So appreciate your time, and thanks everybody that could attend. Thanks Rich and Jenna for that information, and have a great rest of your day and have a great weekend, everybody.
Excellent. Thanks everyone. Appreciate it. Bye.